With Valentine's Day right around the corner, building a healthy and loving relationship should be top of mind right now. Instead of focusing on the commercialization of Valentine's Day, why not take a moment to learn some effective communication tools to impress your loved one? Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Health Break. Love and relationships are the focus of today's episode. Tune in to learn more about emotional intelligence, the four temperaments, and all about love languages to better understand your partner. Hi, I'm Dr. Nafisa Sekandari, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety-based disorders. It wasn't that long ago that I struggled with my own anxiety and had no idea how to manage it, but now I have control over my anxiety and overall mental health. I created the Mental Health Break podcast to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. Mental illness can cost you time and money. Ignoring your symptoms will only make the problems worse. Taking time out of your busy day to dedicate to improving your mental health can lead to long-term health and wellness. In this podcast, each week you'll learn tips, tricks, and proven strategies to help you regain control of your life, all while prioritizing your mental health. If you want to improve your life, regain control of your mental health, and feel empowered, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Today's episode is brought to you by the Transforming Anxiety course, an online, self-paced anxiety course to help you manage and control your anxiety from the comfort, privacy, and convenience of your own home. Learn how to transform your anxiety in just 6 short weeks. Course registration is now open. To learn more, visit transforminganxiety.com/course. So what is emotional intelligence and how do you get it? Also, what exactly does it mean to be emotionally intelligent? Today's episode features Hosai Mojaddidi, who joins us to discuss the 5 key elements of emotional intelligence and the significant role they play in creating a healthy and happy relationship. Hosai will also tell us what the 4 temperaments are and how we can use love languages to better communicate in our relationships. Let me briefly introduce Hosai before I bring her on. Hosai Mojaddidi has been serving the Muslim community for over 25 years as a teacher, public speaker, author, writer, spiritual counselor, and mental health advocate. She currently teaches self-development and spiritual development classes for adults and youth and is actively involved with promoting social emotional learning in mental health advocacy to students and educators via workshops and trainings. She is also a wife and mother of 2 and resides in California. Hello, Hosai. How are you?
Good morning, Nafisa. It's great to be with you. Thank you. I'm doing well.
I know you've been really busy lately, so thank you so much for being here. I shared a little bit about your background, but can you expand on that and tell me about the work you've been doing the past 25 years, especially the marital support you've been providing, and what got you interested in this topic?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I've been working in the Muslim community for a while now. We've aged me, but 25 years or so, and I found myself, I don't know if I would say I necessarily pursued this route of work. It kind of just, happened to me, but I'm grateful for it, of course. I actually went to school to be a teacher and I had a lot of ambition in that route, but then I found myself just working within the Muslim community. There was a void. There wasn't a very large, I don't think there was really any mental health practitioners other than you, maybe at that time that I knew of, or who were even interested in mental health, to be honest. So what would happen is a lot of times people with questions, whether it was related to their relationships or their children or just their own personal individual, issues that they had, they often would turn to, the spiritual leaders or maybe people recognized in the community that they could speak to about their issues. And this might be common for other religious communities as well, where people who are dealing with possibly mental health issues assume that there's maybe some spiritual issues going on there. So we, not really having much knowledge back then, just tried the best we could to help people, and that ended up meaning that we would have these little sort of impromptu counseling sessions wherever I was. It was whether I was at the local mosque or some other place, offering a talk, or even sometimes we would have gatherings of sisters of women where it was all women, gatherings in in homes, private homes, where we just talk and get together. But oftentimes I'd find myself, I refer to them as staircase conversations, because someone would pull me over to a corner or the staircase, and I just spend sometimes up to an hour or so dealing, talking through someone through their problems. And again, not really having any other resources at that time, we did the best we could, and it kind of evolved into this role that I played, I guess, in the community, or that I adopted somehow, where people by word of mouth would just, come to me and say, "Oh, I heard that you help people with their problems. Can me and my husband, or can I talk to you?" And so that transformed into what I now refer to as spiritual counseling, because my background is not in mental health, although I think a lot of people take psychology and sociology in college. I took those as my minors, but I did not, or sociology as my minor and psychology as well, but I didn't, go into that direction professionally. So I just, really tried to help people from a spiritual angle understand some of the issues that they were going through and try to cope and, find solutions for them, or help them find solutions. And that just kind of stretched out. And, when we started our website, Mental Health for Muslims, which I'll credit you for the idea, because you've always been very ahead. That's something I've always admired about you. You, even in our family, have always thought ahead. And so that's what you did. You approached me with this great concept of, fusing our two backgrounds together and creating this wonderful platform where we could actually address a lot of common mental health issues in our community specifically, but provide both the spiritual and the clinical perspective. That was really a launching pad in many ways for me in terms of my mental health advocacy, because I went from that spiritual counseling that I was very familiar with to a more comprehensive and more just holistic view, where I could see the gaps and really help to identify where people might need a more professional offer, professional guidance. And that, again, I credit you for helping me to evolve in my understanding of mental health. And eventually it led me to do a lot more work within the Muslim community. And over the years, in the past, 10 or so years, I've seen so many more mental health practitioners in the Muslim community. And they've, they've benefited from our website. I'm sure you've heard a lot as well of people saying they've used our articles in their own practice. And so it kind of just opened the door for me to do even more mental health advocacy work. So currently I'm on what we call the Community Advisory Board at Stanford with Dr. Rania Awad of the Khalil Center. She created this CAB, we call it, where she gathers mental health professionals and community members who are active, who basically come together to really assess the mental health needs of the community and to try to provide, again, these two-pronged solutions to a lot of their needs. So that's really a lot of the work that I'm doing now in terms of my mental health advocacy. And then I also do very private on, specific situations. I will help with spiritual counseling.
Now, you and I wrote an article back in 2010 that's now reached over 1 million viewers, and I know a lot of sites have used that article to educate the community about marriage and relationships. That article was 10 ways to avoid marrying the wrong person, but you've been helping couples with their relationships for over 20 years. Can you tell me about that work and the struggles that you're seeing in the community?
Sure. So, I think there's a lot of universal, very common marital issues, communication problems, incompatibility, maybe even, just generational or cultural differences that can affect the relationship. I've seen pretty much a broad spectrum of all of those things. But I think from, in my estimation, the problem that I would say is probably the most common denominator with a lot of the marriages that I've specifically helped is really just a lack of preparedness for marriage. A lot of people, I think, get caught up in what I call the commercialization of a lot of these institutions, marriage, parenthood, we get swept away because there's so much about the excitement factor of it. And so I feel like, with just what we see in media, film, television, music, there's just so much focus on the the romantic sort of ideals of what a marriage offers, which are all beautiful, and they certainly exist. But I think when that becomes your primary focus and need, you can have a really rude awakening when you realize that marriage is much more than that. And this is oftentimes, you're bringing not just two individuals together, but entire families together. And with that comes a great amount of responsibility on both individuals to really step up and appreciate that there are going to have to be compromises made. And for some people, I think that's hard because, again, they're not prepared for that aspect of marriage. And so it causes, a lot of just disappointment, and because that's not what they expected, or they weren't prepared for it. And then they become very self-involved and only think of their own needs. And so it creates, I think, just a real dissonance in terms of the marriage itself and the individual with their definition of what is happiness and whether or not this marriage is worth it anymore. There's a lot of sudden internal conversations happening because they perhaps weren't really prepared properly for the full view of what a marriage is. So I think that, to me, is without a doubt something that I think every single couple, when I'm talking to them, I'm always like, did you take premarital counseling? Did you attend anything? Did you read any books on this? And most of the time the answer is no. Almost always the answer is no, because they were just swept away with emotions. We fell in love, or, whether it was an arranged marriage or it was a love marriage, whatever. It's just they got swept away with the wedding and the hype of all of that, starting a new life and moving into a new home together, and going on dates and what have you. And that's what they were focused on, not all the other stuff that comes after. As we know, the honeymoon phase fizzles out, and now it's serious. And then you add children into the mix, and it's a whole new ball game. So I think just really being not prepared or ill prepared for taking on the full role, or the full understanding what marriage is what I would say I see the most.
One of the most important jobs we have, besides being a parent, is being a spouse. But you can't go into this job without training and learning the necessary skills for a happy and healthy relationship. And like you said, so many are caught up in the commercialism of marriage and so focused on the wedding day that they don't realize the work that needs to go into the relationship way before that day. So can you talk a little bit about the ways people can focus on improving themselves in order to be the kind of partner that they want to attract, and also the kind of partner that they want to be in a relationship?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many incredible, toolkits that I think are available to everybody now. We live in a digital world, where there's information overload and there's a lot of information out there. So I feel like, there's really no excuse other than maybe you're just, again, lack of focus, because there's plenty of information to pull from. One of the things that I truly appreciate, and I think there's so much benefit to it, is to learn about emotional intelligence, because when you actually understand the framework of emotional intelligence and the 5 key qualities of what a person who has emotional intelligence has, which I can outline for you, according to Daniel Goleman, who's, there's many different people who are now talking about emotional intelligence, but he's credited as one of the pioneers. In 1995, he wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. And in this book, he outlines 5 different qualities that a person with emotional intelligence possesses. The first is that they're self-aware. So self-awareness, I mean, again, we can go into it means so much, right? There's so many ways to interpret that, what self-awareness is. But, that's the first quality. And I'll go into a little bit more detail after I list them. The second quality is self-regulation. The third is motivation. The fourth is empathy. And the fifth is social skills. I've offered a course or a workshop, I guess you could say, on emotional intelligence in parallel with Islamic values and principles. And I like to, just share how they're so common. And they really are part of, just being a good Muslim is being an emotional intelligent person. So self-awareness, for example, again, this is knowing your temperament, knowing who you are and at your core, what your hopes and aspirations are, what your dreams are, also what your shortcomings are, what your pet peeves are, being so in tune with yourself, mind, body, and spirit, right? Having very clear understanding of all of those things. And then also having the emotional literacy to be able to communicate those things to your whoever you are and whoever you're engaging with, whether it's your spouse or otherwise. We have to really appreciate language as an incredible tool that we've been blessed with. But a lot of people, and this is why communication is such a big focus of therapy or counseling or anything that has to do with couples, especially, or families. They're always focusing on giving people communication skills because language is a powerful tool. But I think a lot of people, because they're not really in touch maybe with their own temperament and personality, or they weren't given those skills early on to hone in and to really, come into their own, find their voice, they end up not really having a clear idea about themselves. And then that can obviously create a barrier when you're dealing with living with another person. And it's like, how do you, respectfully, with tact, tell this other person what your needs are? If you're first you don't have self-awareness, and then you also lack the second quality, which is self-regulation. Self-regulation is huge. We sometimes we live in a world, especially nowadays with social media, where we see it much more maybe than ever before, about how reactive people are. People are very triggered. We have these words now that mean things to people because we've become so triggered. But we have to go back and say, well, there's comportment. Comportment is knowing how to balance your emotions and having clarity that, there's a time and a place for everything. And even if something upsets me, that doesn't mean that I should unleash on another person. And so in Islam, we have an entire body, a science that talks about how to regulate one's emotions and really rooting out what we refer to as the diseases of the heart. So we have an entire science called Tazkiyat an-Nafs, and this is called the purification of the soul. It's basically rooting out common diseases of the heart like anger, rancor, envy, enmity, all of these things that can really, again, destroy one's spiritual state, but also, if unrestrained or unbridled, can wreak havoc in relationships. So that's where self-regulation is such a big part of, again, being a whole person, so that when you come into a marriage, you are able to stabilize your emotions and handle conversations and heated discussions with tact, with decorum, with respect. So self-regulation is a second quality. Then he talks about motivation. Motivation is such an important thing because, we see this, I'm sure you see it a lot, that a lot of couples after, maybe having issues, they lose motivation in the marriage or to sustain the relationship, but also in themselves. It can really affect their self-image, their just desire to do more things for their own, success. They just kind of lose that feeling. So again, back to a more faith-based approach, we as Muslims believe that marriage is actually, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us, is a completion of your faith. So it's going to test you. And we are very aware of that that can have, you can again romanticize that hadith and say, oh, how sweet, it's a completion of your faith in that way. Or you can say, from another approach, which is, it's completing your faith because it's really pushing you. It's going to push you to your limits, and your faith is going to have to rise above all of those things that you're going to have to resist a lot. So that's the approach. That's the interpretation that most people have, is that it's really a matter of, it's going to test you, but it's also a very beautiful thing. And there's so much content about the beauty of marriage and all of the things that, it offers, in terms of well-being and in terms of just just, balance and gratitude and all of those virtues that you can derive from having a balanced relationship, right? So we have motivation and then empathy. Empathy is huge. I mean, so many people don't realize that, empathy is something that you have to nurture. It's not for some people, it's their natural empaths, and it's just part of their temperament to really care deeply. But for other people, they're very removed emotionally, so they can lack empathy, and that means they have to actually work on it. And what that, and first, in order to work on it, you have to understand what it is. So empathy is, comes from the Greek pathos and M refers to being in feeling. Pathos is feeling. So in the feeling with someone. And it's very different than sympathy. Sympathy is with, sim is with pathos, right? Feeling. So how do you differentiate the two? Well, when you're sympathetic to someone, you're observing them, you're with them, you're in the same space maybe, or you're just kind of, again, observing it and you feel something, but it's very different than empathy, which is deep, like I feel exactly what you're feeling, or I'm trying to, at least I want to, remove some of that pain from you. So it's a very different experience. And in a marital context, I hear this a lot from couples that, one or the other just is totally removed emotionally and they're cold. And I've heard a lot of, other epithets referred to, by couples they referring to their partner, saying that they're just, robotic. They have no emotions. It's like talking to a wall, because again, the person is not really realizing that they're lacking this quality of being empathic. And maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's years of resentment and problems. But to have that, as a main part of your relationship or an ongoing quality in the relationship is going to eventually destroy it. So we need to be aware that these are qualities you have to develop and nurture. And so, and then the fifth point is social skills. As I referred to before, marriage is not just a marriage of two individuals. In most cases, it is a marriage of families and extended, members and friends. All of our groups that we bring into the relationship are also impacted once we unify with another person. So what social skills teach you is how to balance your own individual needs and still maintain, again, your social relationships and maintain them in a healthy way without letting your emotions get the best of you, being irrational. Sometimes couples will, out of resentment or anger towards their partner, cut off ties with family members and make really irresponsible decisions, which speaks to, again, lack of self-regulation, but also, lack of social skills, because they don't realize that little temporary argument you had today, you were highly reactive, and then you may have picked up the phone and called someone's mother or father and went off on them. And, you cause a much bigger problem, because guess what? You eventually may get over that issue, but what you've done in the long run to damage that other relationship isn't such an easy fix. So these are the kinds of things that when you, study something like emotional intelligence, and I'm just giving you a very brief summary of it, but I really highly recommend that individuals look into it for themselves. It will prepare you to be a better human being, not just a better partner, a better human being. And once you're a better human being and you're a whole person and you're an actualized person, obviously, when you get into a marital situation, you're only offering the best of yourself. So I think it's a really important stepping stone before someone even considers marriage.
Wow, those are such good points. I mean, we talk about how difficult parenting is and how in Islam, paradise can be found at the feet of the mother, right? And then marriage tests you so much that it completes half your religion. So I want to get into the universal marriage crisis, which doesn't just impact the Muslim community. It's happening everywhere. I have patients from diverse backgrounds and from diverse faiths, and a lot of people are really struggling right now with finding the right partner or having healthy relationships.
Sure. So certainly there's absolutely a crisis, and again, I'm speaking specifically to the Muslim community. I hear from sisters and brothers, more so sisters who are again, they're professional, they're ready, they're beautiful, they have all these wonderful qualities, inward and outward beauty, that make them prime for to be married, but they're having a hard time finding the right person, or really for, I think, our community, because we're much more conservative when it comes to premarital relationships. In Islam, we don't dating is not really a thing. There's certain ways to, of course, meet another person and get to know them, but we wouldn't refer to it as dating. It's more courting with the intention to get married. So for Muslims, there's not really a whole lot of places that singles can go to meet one another. And that's probably the biggest challenge that I hear. It's like, where are we supposed to go? We don't, because if you look at mainstream society, they have places like bars and clubs that are really, that's the target audience, are young singles who don't have families and other commitments that afford them the opportunity to stay out and party late and then get to meet other people and maybe again go through that process of dating people until they find that right match. Well, for religious reasons, we don't do that part of it, where we're just kind of open to having open relationships, just for the purpose of getting to know someone and kind of familiarizing ourselves with the opposite sex. We don't do that. Our intentions are very focused on marriage, so that can sometimes cause an awkwardness when it comes to organizing any type of event around singles, because the intention is very clear from the beginning why you're there. It's not so subtle. There's no sort of, like warming up, into that conversation. It's kind of like you're here because the, event was advertised as a singles event. And so that can actually be a deterrent for a lot of people who are single, because they don't want to be vulnerable and they don't want to expose themselves or kind of put themselves out there like that. So I found like that certainly contributes to the crisis, is that there's very limited events that are happening for singles, but even those events, when they happen, what ends up happening is there's a large, gender gap, where it's like more, usually it's more women who show up and not a lot of men, or just there's too many differences, right? Where it's like the pool is not really matched well. So you'll have people who are married before, maybe, twice or more. They have children and they're a little older, and then you have a younger pool of people. So it just seems like they're not really matched well. So then people, experiencing that once or twice, they're just like, I'm done. I'm not going to go to these singles events anymore, because it actually makes me feel worse coming from an event like that. I already went in there kind of vulnerable, and now I just feel like there's really no hope. So it just really, it destroys their momentum. So I think, that all these things contribute to the crisis. There are some solutions that I do, when I hear from people, try to help people kind of come up with some more, new ways or approaches to this. And so one of the things that I think has benefited a lot of people, I know people who've met people, is the online format, because, and there's different platforms. There's some platforms that are free, or to a certain extent, you can check profiles and you can have limited interactions with people, but there's really no membership required. And then there's other paid services. And I really believe you should do the paid services. If you're serious about getting married, you want to also meet people who are serious about getting married. And the problem with a lot of these free services is, yes, it ends up attracting the wrong type of people who are just there for fun or bored, or maybe they're trolls and they just want to catfish people. So there's definitely those negative elements that can come with the social or the online format. But when you have, again, a paid service that's really vets people, and you have to go through a more rigorous process to even be in the applicant pool, I think it does benefit people. I've known several people who've met people online. So I think that though does require a certain degree of vulnerability. And for those who are single, I say, you have to kind of come out of your shell a little bit when it comes to marriage in general, whether you're meeting someone in a public space or online. It does require that you're open. And if you're having a challenge because you're working full time, you're not involved in your community, you're not really able to engage with people who are, in the community to either advocate for you if they're married and they know that you're single, or other singles that would know that you are single, then you have very limited options. And maybe the best recourse for you is to try the online format and not to, be intimidated by it, or to think that it's something that only people who are, because I hear a lot of, just negative associations with it. But I think we've evolved, maybe in the beginning it was way too early or too soon for people to do it. But now a lot of people are online, and online dating or online matchmaking is very popular and it's very normalized. So I think you just have to get over whatever stigmas you may have about it and look at it like, you know what? Maybe there is someone who's on the other side of the world or on the other side of the country or wherever, who's like me, just, too busy in life to go out and try to do this in a real time sort of physical space. And I got to turn to the online format, and let me at least be approachable and be open to it and see what happens, inshallah. And let's just, have hope that there are, options out there for everybody. I believe that. I believe everybody, we all have someone special out there, and hopefully, God can bring hearts together, but we have to be resourceful.
I again want to stress that this isn't just for the Muslim community. The non-Muslim community is also struggling. My patients are tired of going to bars and meeting the wrong people. And so I think the key is to really know yourself and really know what you want, but also to heal from the issues that you have so you're not attracting the wrong types of people. I know people that have a pattern of attracting narcissists, for example. You can pack a room full of wonderful quality matches, but they'll tend to gravitate towards that narcissist because they haven't yet healed from their own past issues. So that can be a concern. Can you tell us a little bit about the four temperaments and the love languages so people can understand what they need to communicate their own needs better?
Absolutely. Well, I love that you made that point, because as that article that we wrote a few years back highlighted, there's certainly things that you should avoid. But again, if you don't even know what your own needs are and what's in your best interest, it'll be very difficult to see those red flags, to see them, and to avoid them. So that's where self-awareness, going back to emotional intelligence, is so important, because when you have that ability to know what your own needs are, what your own limits are, then you know what's in your best interests. And so I agree 100% with that. Now, the other tools that you mentioned are things that are really favorite, tools of mine that I refer people to. One is the 5 love languages, which you're very familiar with as well. But I believe it's by Gary Chapman. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he outlines 5 love languages, which are, again, ways that we receive and express love. And every single person, I love to teach this even to children. My children know it. I have 2 boys, 8 and 11 years old. They've known about the love languages for a long time now. But I encourage people to teach this to their families, because it is, again, another communication tool. It helps you to express your needs in a very concise, simple way. What are the 5 love languages? Well, one is, words of affirmation, acts of service, physical touch, gifts, and the last one is, so the 5 qualities: quality time, acts of service, gifts, physical touch, and words of affirmation. So when you, again, understand that these are 5 key things, needs that all people, to a certain degree, we're all going to vary, right? Differently. What's a priority to one might not be a priority to another. But what it does is, again, it gives you something to work with. So for me, for example, words of affirmation are very important. I am a very expressive person. I write, I speak a lot. So I need words. I need, encouragement. I need recognition, acknowledgement when I do something. Compliments are always great. Who doesn't love a good compliment, right? So every single person has to identify what their primary love language is. And for me, that's absolutely the case. But I know other people where they're not really big on that, because they themselves aren't very expressive. They're kind of, quieter, more, reserved personality types. So they're not that big on that, but they very much appreciate, for example, acts of service or quality time or even physical touch, right? So all of us are going to differ to a certain degree on these things. And we will have a primary love language, and maybe the others will kind of fall in place. But it's important to understand your own self, to, so that you can express to your partner, to the people in your family, to your friends, because sometimes those miscommunications happen because we tend to give how we receive, right? And so if you are a person who, let's say, yes, words of affirmation are your love language, you might think that this is what everybody, that's how everybody receives love. And so you might focus a lot on words, and then you're not focusing on the other things like quality time or acts of service or physical touch, things that really matter to people. So it's so important that and this is where empathy, going back to, again, emotional intelligence is key, because with empathy, you will learn to see the other's needs and the other's perspective instead of always just projecting your own. So love the 5 love languages. I highly encourage you to look into it, because it will really just, again, give you more, something to work with in terms of really communicating your needs better and to better understand the needs of the people in your life. And then the other thing that you referenced, Nafisa, is called the Four Temperaments. And so I do a workshop on the 4 temperaments too, because again, I'm very passionate about, social emotional learning, really teaching people how to become more aware of themselves. And so any tool that I can find that's sort of popular and can be, broken down and explained to people and accessible to people, I try to use that in my, talks and in my, work that I do. But the 4 temperaments is a wonderful tool. For centuries, it was used throughout the world. This idea that all human beings kind of have specific qualities and tendencies that can be, sort of organized in this typography of the 4 temperaments. And so you see modern, personality types, Myers-Briggs, you see the color code, Enneagram, DISC. There's a lot of popular personality tests that people will take, even the 16 personalities. And if you pay attention, you'll see that almost all of them are multiples of 4. And so the reason for that is actually the 4 temperaments is an ancient, discipline. It's something that's been in existence for a long time. And even our modern personality tests, if you do the research, you'll find that they're rooted in the 4 temperaments, which basically explains that, there's initially we can sort of break down human personality into 2 different categories, which are the more extroverted category types, personality types, and then the more introverted personality types. So you have what we call the choleric temperament and the sanguine temperament, and these are very extroverted, outwardly just very clear, demonstrative personality types. And then you have the introverted ones, which are called the phlegmatic and the melancholic. And so the way that we help to differentiate between these two is, first, yes, are they extroverted and introverted? But also we look at their reactivity, because reactivity really tells a lot about a person's temperament. So if you're highly reactive in any situation, you're very quick to respond to things, you're fiery, and you can be intense in your reactions, and you're outspoken, you're vocal, you are not afraid or intimidated by conflict, you're likely either a choleric or a sanguine. So you have a very strong sort of personality type. Whereas the non-reactive people, they take time deliberating over things, even in altercations, even in situations where it's intense, right? A lot of people can freeze up, and there is that idea of freezing up like a deer in headlights. Well, how does that happen to some people, and other people can just be, adrenaline kicks in and they're, off, right? Well, how do we differentiate? It's temperament. And so you have the phlegmatic and the melancholic, which are slow to react people. So we look at the reactivity of the individuals, but also we look at the duration of the reactivity. So let's just say, for example, in a conflict, okay, in a conflict situation, if someone is a choleric, they're not only intense in their reaction, but that reaction endures. It's actually got longevity. It might take them a really long time to get over that reaction. So in a marital context, if you have a partner who in a heated debate or discussion is super aggressive and very, strong in their response, and then they play, the silent treatment or the cold war for like weeks on on end sometimes, and they're not forgiving. They don't apologize. It's not in their nature to try to fix it, because they're still in it, right? They're likely a choleric temperament because they're highly reactive, and then they have that long, duration of reactivity. The sanguine is also highly reactive. So the sanguine, and I'm a sanguine personality type. So for me, for example, in any situation, because I am, again, expressive, I will react right away. But I'm also, the reaction or that the duration is short. I don't like negative emotions, so I try to fix it very fast. So if there's any dispute or anything that's tense, I will maybe react in the moment because emotions get the best of me. But I'm also the one that comes back and goes, okay, sorry about that. I lost my cool. Let's fix it. And I'll just want to really just fix it and get over it. And I can do that pretty quickly. So those are the two reactive temperaments. Then you have the non-reactive temperaments. How are they different? Well, you have that phlegmatic. And again, you want to apply this in a marital context. The phlegmatic is the person who, in a heated discussion, will stand there stunned. They're shocked. They are very obviously maybe affected. They might start to cry, but they cannot express themselves. That doesn't mean they don't feel. That doesn't mean that they're weak, right? And I've seen this, unfortunately, a lot of times, is these poor phlegmatics will get, beat up a lot because they don't have the fight and the bark to come back, and to match the person who's really aggressive. But they feel intense emotions. They just need process time. So they end up freezing in that moment. And that, unfortunately, is perceived as weakness. So they can actually be victims of, oftentimes, of abuse because they don't have the ability to react in time. And so the oppressor or the person engaging in them just perceives that as, well, you're not a match for me. And then they'll just, keep reeling into them. So anyway, it's unfortunate, but I do see a lot of phlegmatics suffering in this way. So they're, and how they're different again is that they need time to process. So they may not in the moment be able to say anything to you. They'll just stand there, but then you give them a day, 2, 3 days, maybe a few hours. It just depends on their process time, that they have to absorb everything that happened and think back on how it started and kind of replay the whole scenario. Then when they collect their thoughts and they can stabilize their emotions, because they don't like to, obviously, in that heightened emotion, react, then they'll come and they'll want to fix the situation, because they are also, like the sanguine, the duration is short. They don't want to sit with resentment and anger and have that hostility in the relationship. So they want to quickly repair. So that's your phlegmatic. It's just that their reactivity time is very short. Now the melancholic is as you can maybe guess already, is probably the most intense of all the temperaments, because they not only have very slow reactions to things like the phlegmatic, but their duration is very long. So these are the people who maybe and there are some marriages like this where it's like a stone wall. You get nothing from the other person. They're very, they don't feel the need, or they just are so angry that they can suppress a lot of that emotion, and it ends up basically causing turmoil inside of them. But outwardly, they don't give you much of anything. They might give you a cold presence, but there's really not much expression of their emotions at all for the melancholic temperament. And then they also endure. So they'll end up being very angry and resentful internally. And that can play out in a lot of, manipulation or other sort of vindictive behavior, where they are trying to get their just desserts, by making you suffer. And so you see a lot of that, in toxic marriages, where there are people who will just, spend a lot of time manipulating the situation because they're so angry over something that happened, instead of processing and talking about it and getting over it. So anyhow, this is sort of, again, a quick summary of the four temperaments, but you can see just in these few minutes how much, kind of it can open your eyes to see that there is, patterns to human behavior. And if we can, again, try to understand them under a system that is clear and that gives us guidance on how to engage engage these different temperaments, then it can really make you more effective in your relationship and a more effective communicator in general, because you'll start to see patterns in people outside of the marriage, your coworkers, your family, your friends. You'll see that their temperaments, how they engage with you, and it just makes for more fruitful and beneficial relationships, in my opinion.
So, what tips do you have for couples that have been going through quarantine and shelter in place for the past year?
Sure. I mean, I think, all of the points that we made in this discussion will offer some relief for people who are struggling. I know, the quarantine itself, being in close quarters with anybody, whether you love them or not, it's just not always easy. We do need to take a break from one another, for that reason. But there might be other layers to why there's tension in the house. Financially, I know a lot of people are struggling. So I think this is where our empathy really needs to increase for one another, because everybody is in it, and if you just go inward and make it about yourself, and you get hyper vigilant or hyper focused on your own suffering, your own frustrations, your own anger, your own, anxieties, and you're focused, then you're not going to be able to see that all of the people in your family and household are impacted by this as well. And nobody's really doing anything to you, because that's kind of like what your mind can sort of deduce, right, from people's behavior. That's the final sort of thinking that you end up with, that, oh, everybody's kind of doing this to me, or I'm a victim of some of other people's behavior, and that's not the case. So I think really just increasing your empathy and appreciating that this is a difficult time for much of the world, and in order to make it out of this, we have to be patient with one another and not mince words and kind of try to read between every line and be triggered by every little thing, or look for things to complain about, because you're just, again, upset at the situation, you project that anger onto the people in your household. So you become extra critical, a little bit more rude in the way that you interact with them. All of these things come back down to your own ability to self-regulate and to, again, increase your empathy. So I think for couples, really, this is the time, as we say in our faith, marriage tests you, and certainly in situations like this, it tests you even more. But we want to come out on the other side having passed the test, not looking back at this whole experience, having said things we regret, doing things we regret, things that we can't take back. And that's, what's happening to a lot of people. Unfortunately, they've let their emotions sort of go unchecked and unhinged, and they don't realize that there's, clear ramifications of that will go beyond this pandemic. When things, normalize, hopefully soon, you don't want to, like I said, have a lot of things that now you have to, pay for, and that can play out for years to come. So just be mindful of your behavior, be more patient, take a break. If you feel like it's too much for you to be in the home all the time, and the noise level, maybe you have children, or just maybe you just need your personal space more, leave the house. I've had to do that. I have 2 kids, 2 boys. They can be very rambunctious at times. Male energy, too much male energy. So the times where I feel like, oh my God, I need a break, I just go for a drive, or I just go run an errand, go to the grocery store, whatever. And it absolutely helps. It helps me to just, again, calm my own emotions down and stabilize, and then I come back and I'm in a much better mood. So this is, again, self-awareness. You got to know what your limits are. Don't wait for the pressure cooker to the top to come off and just to start screaming. Pay attention to those little moments where, I like the pressure cooker analogy, because when it's boiling, it starts to release some of that pressure, letting you know that it's intense inside. So we all have those red flags that come up. We have those signs, and that whether it's our body temperature, our just our feeling of annoyance, right? We're already, because annoyance leads to anger, which leads to rage. So you need to know that if you're annoyed, and you're annoyed a lot, and you don't fix that by taking necessary breaks, it's going to lead to anger. And that anger, if it's not, again, checked, it's going to lead to rage. So this is where emotional literacy is very helpful. So
So, going back to the four temperaments that you mentioned, are there some temperaments that are a better match than others?
Absolutely. And this is why it's such an important tool to learn. I mean, I'll tell you, for example, as a sanguine, and I've always recognized this about myself, although I didn't know the terms, I've always been drawn to the more melancholic personality type. And I know many sanguine melancholic pairs. And it's a balance, right? Opposites attract because I am a person, and people who know my husband, he's a man of very few words, very deep, like sort of, intense personality type. But there's some maybe mystery to that personality type that appeals to a sanguine because we're so sort of, we're very transparent and everything's so visible. So maybe we are drawn to that more mystery. I don't know, but I've always found that a more quiet, subdued personality type works for me. And I've seen that play out with a lot of people. Phlegmatics and sanguines also tend to draw because they're both not very, intense in their at least the duration of their reactions, and they tend to have similar relationship and emotional focused sort of personality types, whereas the other two are goal oriented. So the melancholic and choleric are very goal oriented people. Those two, I mean, I'm just putting it out there as a match, very intense. I would avoid the choleric melancholic match because it's going to be, I mean, you can imagine two intense personality types, but also they have the duration. Yeah, but we could, go on for about the matches. But if you read the books, there's plenty of stuff online. It'll give you all the insights on how to match.
Thank you so much for taking the time for being here. Can you let us know where people can find you?
Sure. So I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I also have a website. It's my full name, www.hosaimojaddidi.com. You can get up to date. I have all my talks put up there that I've been recording, and I'm trying to keep more up to date there. But Facebook and Instagram are really my most active social media platforms. I'm on Twitter, not very active there, unfortunately. So you can follow me if you want. I really appreciate again the time and opportunity to be here with Nafisa. She does incredible work. So, we have to really be grateful to her for providing us with this platform. And we've done a few lives, and I hope Nafisa and I will continue to do more. I love our conversations.
Thank you, Uzi. Thank you. I really appreciated you being here, and I really enjoyed this conversation as well. That was so informative for me. Was it also helpful for you? Did you figure out if you're a sanguine or a melancholic temperament in your relationship? Do you tend to want words of affirmation or acts of service in your relationship? I just found the whole conversation so interesting. I know that learning about your own wants and needs in a relationship can help you build a healthy, happy, and long-term relationship. Now, I briefly mentioned the article 10 Ways to Avoid Marrying the Wrong Person earlier. This article has reached over 1 million people around the world. I've converted that article into a portable, beautiful PDF guide for you to use as a guide for finding the right match for you. If you're interested in downloading the free PDF guide, 10 Ways to Avoid Marrying the Wrong Person, visit transforminganxiety.com/love. The beautiful 10-page guide will give you the important tips for a healthy and happy marriage. To learn more about Hosai, please visit transforminganxiety.com/07. If you're enjoying the Mental Health Break podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or a 5-star rating since that'll help others find the podcast. I want to wish you all a wonderful Valentine's Day, and I can't wait to see you here next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.